Hello, family. Today I wanted to talk about something that might be causing you some angst. So, the title of the video is Be Ready, because your life is just about to happen. And in my life, I want to give you some examples. It seems as though that so often the things that we think are terrible oftentimes turn out to be quite lovely. Where you say to yourself, well, when something occurs, you just absolutely say, oh, it's the worst thing possible. And then a year later, 6 months later, you go, oh my God, if that hadn't happened, this wouldn't have happened, that wouldn't have happened, and so on. So I just wanted to give you a few examples of how my life has turned out, where I don't want to say it's by happenstance. As a matter of fact, I want to suggest that quite often, in my opinion, you have planned many of these events prior to coming into this life. I know it sounds a little woo-woo, but stick with me on this one. As I was growing up, I was always involved in fitness and gymnastics and diving and swimming and things along those lines. And I was really passionate about them. And I found that when I was in high school, I kind of adopted the weight room. It was mine. That's how I looked at it. And if anybody wanted to know where I was when I wasn't somewhere else in a class or whatever, they could generally find me in the weight room. And in the weight room, it was always about helping other people, because I knew what I was doing. And they would come to me and they would say, can you help me do anything you do? I'd go, sure. You just have to listen to what I say and do it exactly, because you're not paying me. And they would listen to me, and I would coach them and train them. And then I remember one day, I was looking at the clock on the wall. Don't know why, but it stuck in my mind. And I thought, I wonder if I could actually make a living doing this, training other people. And then I thought, really the only people that would need that kind of training might be a professional athlete or a football player. And I goes, I really don't want to deal with those guys. And I kind of wrote it off. But wouldn't you know that through a series of events, I was able to live that dream of doing that which I wanted to do. So here it was. I had been with my girlfriend, and we were at University of Maryland, and I needed money. So I looked in the local paper. Back then they were actually papers, and there was a little tiny ad for a pool manager in Washington, D.C., and I lived in a place called Greenbelt, which was about 20 minutes. And I thought, well, that's an interesting job. So, long story short, I made my way down there. We drove in, and I interviewed with a gentleman named Dave DeConcini, and we just hit it off. It was a blast. Our senses of humor clicked. And he said, you're my man. All I need now is a copy of your pool operator certificate. And I said, David, I don't have one. He was crestfallen. Poor guy goes, I need somebody right now. I need a pool manager to open the pool. I said, all right. I said, would you hold the job for me for 1 week? And he goes, Jack, the course to get your pool operator certificate is a 2-month course. And I said, got it. Would you hold the job for 1 week? And he went, he was going to say no, and then he said, okay. I said, well, where do you get these things? And he said, at the Blue Plains Water Treatment Plant, very close to where I was in Washington, D.C. So I got on my motorcycle and I drove over there. And I walked in, and there's a guy behind a desk, and there's some students at their desks studying. And I said, is this a place where you get your pool operator certificate? And he said, yes, it is. I said, well, I need one. He said, well, you're in luck. These guys in 2 days are going to take their course, and then the next course starts the following week, and it's 2 months, and there you go. And I said, let me ask you a question. If I go ahead and pay for the course right now, you would give me the books, right? And he goes, yeah. I said, you know, I'm a really good student. In 2 days' time, when these guys are taking their test, I'd like to come in and take it with them. And he goes, but it's a 2-month course. I said, like I said, I'm a really good student. And he said, he paused and he went, okay. So for the next 48 hours, I didn't sleep, and I went through those books. And I already had a background in swimming pools because I was a competitive swimmer, and pool chemistry was kind of a thing for me. Had sensitive eyes. Anyway, long story short, then I came back in, and they give you about 4 hours to take the test. And I was done in about 40 minutes. So I carry my papers up to the guy, and he says, you giving up, huh? I said, no, I'm done. He said, you are? I said, yep. Handed him the papers, and he said, well, I'll grade them and I'll get your grade back to you next week. I said, look, these guys have got another 3 hours here. You're just reading a beach novel. Now, there was no computers back then, so I said, don't you have the key to the test in your briefcase there? And he goes, yeah. I said, well, yeah. He said, all right. So he sat down, and about 20 minutes later, he said, okay, smart guy, you aced it. Good for you. He said, I'll go ahead and get your certificates mailed out to you next week. And I said, well, actually, don't you have your certificates in the briefcase also? And he goes, yes. And I said, well, and he said, if I give you the certificate, will you leave? I said, yes, I will. So he gives me the certificate, writes it out, puts a little gold stamp on it, make it official. I said, thank you very much, and I just left. And drove straight over to the place where I was getting the job as the pool manager, which was a holiday spas, like LA Fitness or one of those big places. Anyway, I show up, and there's David at the front desk, and he goes, hey, Jack, what are you doing here? I said, here's my pool certificate. And he goes, is this real? I said, yep, sure is. He said, now, I think it was like Friday. I said, is it okay if I start on Monday? He said, sure, that's great. So Monday morning, bright and early, I came in with all my tools because the pool was horrible. I drained both pools. There was a hot tub and a swimming pool, and I drained them completely and started fresh, scrubbed everything down, scrubbed all the mirrors, made everything beautiful, took my tools in and worked on the chlorination system and also the jet pumps for the whirlpools, which had not been working. So I fixed it all, got everything running beautifully, and there was a constant stream of people coming up to David's office going, oh, we love the new lifeguard. You know, he's great, you know. And remembering, I'm about 19 years old at this point. I had spent the previous summer, and this was now like September, I'd spent the previous summer on the beach, so, you know, all tanned and beautiful and everything. It was pretty cool. Anyway, I had given myself, since I was actually the pool manager, not just the lifeguard, I'd given myself the early shift, 10 in the morning, and the place closed at 10 at night. So I gave myself the 10 to 6 shift. But from 6 to 10 afterwards, I could actually go in and work out. So I had this fantastic gym. But you know what? I've never had the ability to walk past somebody doing an exercise either ineffectively or dangerously. And I'd make a suggestion, and first off, people would go, what's going on? I said, look, I'm just going to make a suggestion. If it doesn't make sense, don't worry about it. But it did make sense. And about 30 days later, as you remember, back in the weight room at my high school, I thought, maybe one day I could make a living doing this. Well, within 30 days, there were more people that trusted me on the weight room floor than they were trusting the quote-unquote professional trainers. Anyway, there was a sales component to this also, and these guys came to me and they were ready for me. They said, you know, Jack, I think you should be doing what we're doing. And I said, sorry guys, I'm going to be, when I got out of school, I'm going to make real money. I'm going to sell commercial real estate, maybe Maseratis, I don't know. But I'm going to make real money. And they were ready. They pulled out their checks with their W-2s attached. And I looked at it, and I did quick math. And I realized that these guys at the low end were earning $40,000 a year for the newbies, and for the guys that had been doing this for a while, they were earning over $120,000 a year, which today is not bad money, but back then it was like out of this world. An attorney getting out of college after all those years would probably only make about $40,000 back then, and we're talking $1977. Anyway, I said, okay, I'm in. And one of the guys, his name was Joe Sturgio, God bless you, Joe, and he came over to my apartment that night, and he actually gave me a presentation verbatim on tape. We taped it. And then he taught me how to overcome objections. And then he taught me how to sell massage packages and overcome objections and do something called a contract close, where you literally put the contract down, hand him a pen, direct him where the signature should go. It says, I just need your authorization right here. Anyway, the next 10 years of my life, I became one of the top salespeople in that industry. Became sales and sales management, sales training, personal development. I had amazing mentors, and I always had the connection with the people on the gym floor, so it was fantastic. So the beautiful part about this was that I'd made the plan for this several years earlier, right? But here it was coming to fruition. The point of this video is you need to be ready for the opportunities, for the things that you really want in your life, and be able to act on them. So when the opportunity came, they gave me a 2-week trial. Now that I had my presentations, I outproduced everybody else, and then they gave me a full-time job. So at the beautiful age of 19 years old, interestingly enough, I was about to get married for the first time, and I now had a career that would enable me to buy a home at 19, buy my dream cars, boat, you name it. I was living the life of a pretty successful 40-year-old when I was about 19 years old. And the key that I want you to think about is when you're making a plan for something that you want, and that you, in your heart of hearts, you'd really dig it, that would be a cool thing. You're emotionalizing about it. Things in the universe are going to start combining, and the right people will show up, and the decisions. Now, you also have to take the initiative. I had faith that somehow or other I would be able to get that pool operator certificate within a week. Well, it took me 2 days. And, true story, it was a great thing. It started my path rolling. And along the way, whenever I would leave one thing, the next thing would pop up. And I learned from each of those steps. So I want you to think about that if you're going through a little bit of a tough time, or if you're frustrated, even more, saying, oh my goodness, what should I do? I want to do this, but they tell me to do that. I'm going to say, trust your gut and go with what you want to do, and have patience that it might take a minute for that little euphemism, a minute. I don't know how long it's going to take you. It only took me 2 years to realize my dream. And then the next decade of my life pretty much was devoted to being in that environment, the fitness environment, helping other people achieve their goals. Man, I dug it. I lived it. I loved it. And I hope that you find what is exactly right for you, but have that plan, know what you really want. Your passion is a big part of this, and be ready. My name is Jack at searchforpurpose.com, and I'm here to help you to find and achieve your goals, and give you a little advice along the way about some of the things that have worked, and perhaps even some of the things that haven't worked. Until next time, we'll see you.